Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of one of our 2020 Elul study classes.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. Closer to evening over here by me, but good afternoon to you over there in Los Angeles. I thought we'd just start by just singing a nigun again, and maybe we'll get to it with the words in a little bit. It just goes like this. Is that better, Henry? Just like that. Hello everyone. It's nice to get to be here with you, to get to sing and learn a little bit, and spend some time together this afternoon here as we make our way through Elul, preparing ourselves for what will be a particularly unique beginning of the Jewish year. And so I thought that we'd continue our journey through some of the liturgy, both of the high holidays, but also the liturgy at large, making our way both in song and in text to explore a little bit about what the hidden meaning behind the melodies are, a little about some of the Torah that enhances and informs the music. So I posted the link again in the chat if you want to have the source sheet for yourself, but otherwise we'll also follow along together here. So I'm going to share my screen, and we'll take a look at our text together. Did that pop up? Can everybody see that? Oh. I'm just learning how to use my mouse here. Okay, so what we're going to do is go back to this, this original journey we were talking about a little bit last week, which is the journey to the very beginning of creation. We learned that the first day that the world was created was actually the 25th of Elul, and that after that, 6 days later, human beings were created on the first day of Tishrei, which we now celebrate as Rosh Hashanah. So we're going to look at some of the other things that happened on creation and some of the things that went into, in a different kind of way, the story of the creation of humanity, different from how we looked at it last time when it was sort of God sort of just going 1 hour after another. And here we have a new take on it, starting with a really beautiful Hasidic text from the Baal HaLevushim. Do we have a person who wants to take us through and be reading it in the English for us out loud today? Could also be me. People are filling their voices.
I can read English.
Well, great. Will you take us through, Jackie?
Sure. And the Holy One said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation." Sourcesheet 1:1. Tishrei is an acronym for Din, justice, Shalom, peace, and Emet, truth. These three things are the roots of the earth, the foundation of human existence, and the conditions by which humanity can exist. Without them, there is war amongst humanity and desolation.
Okay, so we're going all the way back, even before humanity was created. We're now on the 28th of Elul. We're on the third day of creation, and God says, let the earth sprout vegetation. Tadshe haaretz deshe. And the Hasidic masters, they never want to look at anything literally. They always want to try and pull out, what is this interpretation that we can use to help us live our lives? What are the ways that these words can be actionable and intentional for how we're going to live our lives today? So they say deshe isn't really about vegetation. It's not grass. It's actually an acronym. An acronym for din, justice, shalom, peace, and emet, truth. Right? It says these three things are the roots of the earth, foundations of human existence. So I'm wondering if we can maybe think about this together. Why are these the three things that are the foundation of human existence for the Baal HaLevushim? Why justice, peace, and truth? What do we think? Yeah, Alex.
So what struck me is that chesed is not on there. And I think that when you have all three of those, chesed is unnecessary. But one does require justice for chesed, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but it sounds right to me. So yeah, that was what struck me right away.
Nice. So the chesed seems to be missing, and we recognize that a lot during our week of chesed here of building up at Beth Am. And I think that perhaps maybe what you're saying is that din, shalom, and emet is kind of like an equation that gets to chesed, right? If we can have a world that has all three of these things, that is what builds chesed. So then we don't need to name chesed itself because we have all of its component parts. Beautiful. I love that. Anything else people are noticing about these particular characteristics, traits? I was I'm working as the assistant rabbi at a synagogue in the Chicago suburbs this summer, and I was talking about this text with them, and somebody pointed out that if you use the Sim Shalom weekday Siddur, I don't know if it's also in the Lev Shalem new Siddur, but when you're davening from that Siddur and you have those rabbinic texts in the morning that come right before Kaddish Rabbanan, they're divided into three categories of texts, and those categories are Din, Shalom, and Emet. I don't really know how they came to that, but like the three categories of text that we study in the morning as these rabbinic texts that we're going to begin our day with are Din, Shalom, and Emet. That maybe we're taking upon this Hasidic teaching that if we can think a little bit about how we can create and actualize justice, peace, and truth in the world, then that's what's going to make us be able to live our day after our morning tefillah. I love the idea of, and the wording here is also really beautiful. It says, without them, cherev ad ish berehu, there's war amongst humanity, umidbar, and desolation. Right? The word midbar meaning desert. Right? So without the grass, the vegetation, which is justice, peace, and truth, we're left with desert, with a world of desolation. And I love the idea that these three things sort of build together to create a harmonic world. Right? Without one of these pieces, the other two can't exist. Right? Justice is what creates peace. Right? If we're in a world without justice, then there's war. If we're in a world without peace, then there can't be justice because people can't be expected to lift each other up when they're not at peace with each other. And similarly with truth, right? If we can't have sort of an ultimate truth, if we can't have some people that understand and are decisors of truth, then justice is impossible. Right, so all these three things have to sort of go hand in hand. And without them, we can't get to this kind of society that we want to live in. All right, so we have this idea. Let's hold on to that in our minds. We have these three characteristics, Din, Shalom, and Emet. And these character traits actually get into a very, very wild dialogue with God. All of them are anthropomorphized. And so I want to, Jackie, if you'll take us through this next text also. It's a commentary from Breshit Rabbah, also on this same story about how God began to create human beings.
When God began to create the world, all of the angels began to argue with each other. The angel of Chesed, loving kindness, said, Holy One, you should create humankind as they are filled with loving kindness. The angel of truth said, O Holy One, do not create humankind as they are filled with lies. The angel of righteousness said, create them, for they will establish justice. The angel of peace said, do not create them, for they will be in constant strife.
Okay, let's pause here for a second.
What did God...
So we now have, it appears, we've now received chesed. Here comes chesed coming into the picture, and we got these 4 character traits now, and they're in a sort of battle with each other. God says, I'm going to create human beings. And they go up, and each one of them presents a case for whether human beings should exist or not. Right? And we would think, or at least I would think, why are these traits not on the side of human beings? Why would they not? These traits, which seem to be powerful and positive, uplifting character traits of human beings, why would they not be in favor of human beings being created? So let's just take one of them at a time. So we have chesed, loving kindness, right? It seems obvious that loving kindness would say you should create human beings, right? They're filled with chesed. They're able to do acts of chesed all the time. Acts of chesed are so beautiful. How could the world exist without that? You have to create human beings. And then here comes truth, and truth says, no. You can't create human beings because they're filled with lies. Right? Truth does not trust human beings. Fascinating. And then we get righteousness, which I would connect to Deen, right? Justice and righteousness sort of going hand in hand here. Righteousness says, create them because they're the ones who are going to enact justice in the world. But then the angel Shalom comes back up and says, don't create them. They're going to be in constant strife with each other. So on one side we have chesed and tzedek, loving kindness and righteousness. And on the other side we have emet, truth, and we have shalom, peace, who are saying don't create human beings. So I don't know if anybody already looked ahead to see what happened, but Jackie, why don't you tell us what God decides?
What did God do? God lifted up the angel of truth and threw it down to the ground, as it is written, and truth was hurled to the ground. Daniel 8:12. The angels immediately began shouting, Holy One, why have you so chastised the chief of your court? Let truth arise again from the earth. As it is written, truth springs up from the earth.
Okay, so we got a lot of stuff going on here. God decides to punish the characteristic traits that are saying that human beings should not be existed, should not be created. Hold on one second. I don't know how to find the... I think... I don't know if somebody posted in the chat, but I can't see it. Oh, there we go. Now I can see it. Okay. It's hiding. Still hiding. Hold on one second. Sorry. Okay. So we have all these different character traits, and they're doing a whole bunch of different things. And God throws emet down to the earth, and so the angels, all the different character traits, say why emet, and it's because emet is God's seal, right? We say Adonai Elohechem emet at the end of the Shema. So it's said that this seal of God is truth. So why would God hurl truth to the ground? What do we think is the significance of God throwing emet down to the earth here? Any ideas?
Something that I think is really interesting is that, and looking at the two of them together, is that truth is the only one that in theory is not relative. Like the thing either happened or it didn't happen. Like what each person thinks of justice is different, and so it's interesting that that God is setting the foundation is the one thing you can't argue with. Like either the world was created or the world was not created. Either people exist or they don't exist. One is the truth and one is not. Whereas like justice is relative and righteousness is relative. Chesed could go either way. Like in theory it kind of is what it is, but like truth is the one where like it just is or is not.
Beautiful. Okay, so there's this possibility that truth is the only one that has like an ultimate yes or no. The other ones are all possibilities. There's sort of varying levels of each one of those, but this truth, we might have this sort of ultimate idea, so it feels like the outlier here. Yeah,
Alex. Also, I think truth, it requires excavation, and it requires it's a very complicated thing to understand in the human world, because there are so many I agree with Jackie, and I also think that humans shade truth, so it's very complicated to seek it and very complicated to understand it and to see it. So it is our responsibility to seek truth in a different way from others, perhaps because it requires more excavation from within the earth, from within like this human experience.
Nice. Okay, so we have to dig into truth. Truth is the one that requires us to really think about it. We have to figure out how to discern what truth is in a way that it's much easier to see in some ways the other three. Yeah, I think that there's a connection with both of what you're both saying here, and I think that that's the reason perhaps why God throws truth to the ground, right? So it comes up from the earth. Right, vegetation, grass needs to be watered. It needs to be cared for. It needs to be watched over. And when God throws emet down to the earth, God is saying these other things, chesed, din, shalom, maybe I can help take care of them. But truth is on you. Truth is something you have to dig up. Truth is something you have to figure out. You have to be the ones that are the caretakers of truth. Because there has to be a way for us to get to this ultimate truth. And so when it says truth springs up from the earth, God is literally throwing truth to the ground to be in human beings' hands. Or we're now in charge of finding, of discerning, of digging deep and understanding what eternal truth is. So I was thinking about these two ideas, and that's sort of what came to me when I was coming up with this melody that we were singing a little bit earlier for these words, Emet atahu rishon, atahu acharon. In truth, you are first. In truth, you are last. And without you, there's nothing. Right? There's ein lanu melech, ein lanu goel u'moshiach. There's no redemption. There's no salvation. There's nothing without truth. And there's a whole bunch of ways to read this text, right? And emet, this word, is a really, really powerful word. I love the way that all the Hebrew letters connect to each other. That there's different significances between different words. I love gematria, which is Hebrew numerology. That every single letter has its own numerical significance. Emet is one of the particularly powerful words. It begins with Aleph, and it goes all the way to Taf. It encompasses the entire Hebrew alphabet, with Mem right there in the middle, right at the middle of the alphabet. And it also encompasses the entire life cycle of a human being, right? Searching for truth is an everlasting endeavor, from Em, from the womb, from the mother, to Met, to death. Right? The entire collection of our life cycle event, just in this one word, Emet. And so we see it, and emet is in this case is talking about, these words come from the paragraph right before Michamocha. They're sort of stuck right in the middle of the page in a way that sometimes you could just gloss over if you were just reading through the text. But when the words pop out at you, they tell you something, and there it's probably talking about God as this ultimate truth, but also it's talking to each one of us. Emet atahu rishon. In truth, you are first. Emet atahu acharon. In truth, you are last. There are times when you have to hold on to your personal truth, when you have to make sure that you're lifting up yourself and taking care of what your truth needs. But more often than not, emet atahu acharon. You have to hold back. You have to allow other people's truths to get into the forefront. You have to help bring other people's truths who can't bring their own truths forward. You have to help them bring their truth into the spotlight. That's what this is telling us. Emet is a missive. It needs to be watered. We have to tell ourselves that we have to bring truth along with us. So with this deepened understanding of what these words are trying to say, with these words emet, we're going to sit for a couple minutes in these words emet atar rishon. We'll start just with this word emet that repeats a bunch of times, holding on and sort of picking apart each one of those letters until we can lift them up, bringing each one forward and each one behind. And when we sing together with a group of people, I often try and tell people with this text to find moments in the song where you're singing out very loud, where you're finding that your voice is the voice that you're hearing the most, that your emet is out in the forefront of the melody. And then at other times, you're finding moments to hold back so that you can listen and hear the other voices, hear other truths coming to the spotlight. So it's easier when there's a whole bunch of voices sometimes to be able to hold your voice back or to project your voice forward. But there's something particularly unique about when you're only able to hear two voices, your voice and an additional voice. And in that case, in some ways it's very different to be able to vocalize and hear your own voice getting louder and softer in comparison to just one other voice. So I invite you to try that out over the course of the time when we're singing this melody together too. We'll see how it goes. Ay, 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 ay. Beautiful, everyone. Thank you. So, I've been thinking about Emet a lot recently, and also been thinking about this question of humanity's existence and whether or not human beings should have been existed. Mostly because I'm attempting to do Daf Yomi these days, which is studying a page of Talmud each day. And this week there was a particular page that had a very famous teaching on it related to this very question that we're discussing, whether or not human beings should exist or not. And so I thought maybe we should share this together in thinking about entering this holiday season and moving through and trying to figure out what it is we're supposed to do now that we're here on this earth. Jackie, would you want to keep reading for us here? I made the font a little bigger so it's easier.
Sure. Oh yeah, it's much easier to read. Another Baraita. For 2.5 years, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disagreed. These say it would have been preferable had humanity not been created than to have been created. And those said it is preferable for humanity to have been created than had they not been created. Ultimately, they were counted and concluded. It would have been preferably had humanity not been created than to have been created. However, now that they have been created, they should examine their actions that they have performed and fix them. And some say they should scrutinize their planned actions and evaluate whether or not and in what way they should be performed so that they will not sin.
Okay, so we're having a very lengthy debate, right? It lasted for 2.5 years. This comes right after the Talmud tells us that Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel argued for 3 years about some topic that we don't even know about, and then we realize that Beit Hillel is always right. But here, Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai are discussing whether or not human beings are supposed to have been created or not, right? Should humanity exist or should humanity not exist? The same question that the character traits were discussing before human beings were created. Now that we've been created, we're still having the same conversation as the angels. Trying to figure out, was it worth it? Was this the right decision for God to have created human beings? And also fascinating that it's human beings who are having this conversation about whether or not we who are having this conversation should exist or not. So they finally come to a conclusion. And they decide that it would have been better for human beings not to have been created. A fascinating decision from people who then would not have been created, right? They believe that human beings are sinners at heart, which is a hard thing for them to say. They say that, you know what, maybe human beings shouldn't have been created. We cause a lot of tension, we cause a lot of drama to each other. But you know what? The fact is that now we're already here. We're here. That's it. This question isn't a relevant question anymore because we exist. So what we now have to figure out is, what do we do with that responsibility of existence? Here we are. We're living here in the world. We have a responsibility now to do something. What is it? And they come to the conclusion that what we have to do now is think about our actions while we're doing them, after we've done them, and ideally before we do them. And so this is one of the reasons why during this month of Tshuva, we take a look back at all of our actions. We look back at the things that we've done over the past year and see if we could find ways to fix them. And then we look and think about, what are these things that we might do in the future, and how could we choose a different path? Right? That's what it means to be a human being. It's to be a thinking being. Human beings, different from all other creations, we have the ability to process and think about our actions before we do them. So with that ability comes a huge amount of responsibility to do something. So that's what the rabbis are trying to teach us. And they do this amazing thing, which is that they argue all the time. Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai are always disagreeing. They always have differing opinions. Here is one of the few times where they come together, right? They were counted and they concluded. This is a time when they've come to an agreement. They come together to say that human beings are thinking about how to live our lives intentionally. And this is it's one of the most powerful examples of dialogue, of talking and being in conversation with somebody who disagrees with you, vehemently disagrees with you, and even so, finding a way to come together and live in a society that's meaningful and intentional. So this was 4 days ago. And the fascinating thing for me is that the Daf Yomi cycle is a 7.5-year cycle. So the last time this page was studied was not around this period of time. It wasn't during Elul. But I mean, not to say that this is the ideal cycle to be studying Daf Yomi, but I'm finding that every page that I'm looking at has to do with something that's happening in the world around us, an ever-living document per se. So this is what it's teaching us, to find a way to live in the world, and that there's a responsibility that comes with being a human at the minimum level. So with that responsibility, we're actually. Let's take our way down here. This is a new one, so we're going to try this one out together. This is one of my favorite psalms. It's one of the psalms that we sing every morning. We sing on Shabbat mornings, and it's a really, really beautiful teaching about all these different ways that we connect to Torah using all these different pieces of our bodies. So I'll read the English here for us, but it comes from Torat Adonai Timimah. The teachings of the Holy One are perfect, renewing the soul, Meshivat Nafesh, they renew the soul. The decrees of the Holy One are enduring, making the simple wise. The precepts of the Holy One are just, rejoicing the heart. The instruction of the Holy One is radiant, lighting up the eyes. The awe of the Holy One is pure, enduring forever. The judgments of the Holy One are true, righteous altogether. More desirable than gold, than much fine gold, sweeter than honey, than drippings of honeycomb. I just think that there's a lot of really powerful imagery that's happening here. And so before we get to the singing of this text, I wanted to think about two various different interpretations of what this text is trying to tell us. So, Jackie, will you read this one from Rashi on this verse?
The decrees of the Holy One are enduring. The Torah is reliable to witness in those who study it, a return/stirring of the soul. It stirs the soul from the paths of death to the paths of life.
Okay, so this was one of the reasons I wanted to bring this one particularly today. And thinking about tshuva, right, mishivat nafesh, a returning of the soul. That's what the teachings of the Torah are about. Edut Adonai, these decrees, these witnessing. If we experience a moment that's transcendent, if we experience a moment where we feel divinity, we feel holiness, we feel God, it's enough to stir us up. That it's not just about returning, it's about reinvigorating. So that when we arrive back at that place we were before we made this transgression, this indiscretion, we are coming back to it different than we were before. Right? We've had this stirring up of our souls, so then we can't, when we arrive at this situation again, we can't act the same way that we acted previously. It stirs up the soul. And so then we're moving ourselves from the path of death to the path of life. And then let's take a look at Me'or Einayim. Can you read this last one for us too?
Midrash Mishlei 15. What brightens the eyes gladdens the heart. These are those who study Torah. They light up the eyes of all humanity and gladden the heart of humanity too, as it is written. The instruction of the Holy One is radiant, making the eyes light up.
Beautiful. So this verse comes from Proverbs. Me'ir einayim yesamach lev. What brightens the eyes gladdens the heart. When we see things that we love, and we see things that are meaningful for us, it lifts us up. It physically changes the way that we are feeling. And it opens us up to the possibility of change, the possibility of growth. And so I saw this text, and I knew a melody for the first line, but I wanted there to be a melody that I could sing for all four of these lines, that would get all the way to this fine gold, this sweeter than honey, these teachings of Torah. But I wanted a melody that reminded me of the melody that I learned in my childhood. I don't know if anybody else knows it, but it's Torah Hashem Tamima, Torah Hashem Tamima, Torah Hashem Tamima, Meshivas Nafesh, Eidut Hashem Nemana, Machkimat Eti. Do you sing this every Shabbat morning, Rabbi Schatz? Ah, amazing. All right, so there's that.
We definitely don't, but we have sung it. We just don't do it every Shabbat.
Right. Yeah. It's early on in the service. There aren't too many people.
I appreciated your Meshivas instead of Meshivat. That was good. That was really good.
It feels like a yeshivish melody.
Yeah.
So I wanted a melody that would sort of be reminiscent of that would have this sort of march feel to it, that would have this feeling that you could just get up and have a stirring of the soul, that it would light up the eyes, that it would rejoice the heart, that it would feel like you were dripping sort of this like sweet honey all over it. So the melody goes like this. We'll try it just as a nigun first, and then we'll see if we can try it with the words. Okay. I na 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 I na 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 I na I na na I na na I na 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 I na 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 I na 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 na. That's the whole first part. I na 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 I na I na na I na I na I na na I na 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 I na 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 I na 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 again. I na 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 I na I na na I na I na I na na I na 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 I na 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 I na 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 na. Here's part two. I na 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 I na 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 I na 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 I na 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 I na 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 I na 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 I na 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 na. Did it na 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 I na 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 I na 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 I na 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 I na 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 I na 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 I na 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 na. So this melody is what's known as you'll notice it's the A section, and then the B section, and then the C section, and then it goes back to the A section. Goes back to the B section. A, B, C, B. A, B, C, B melody, which in Hasidic nigunim is actually called a Yud, He, Vav, He nigun. It starts at the Yud, it goes to the He, and then it goes to the Vav, and then it goes back to the He. And the idea is that in Chassidish Nigunim, that we don't, when we're elevating ourselves with a nigun, you don't want to step all the way down the ladder, right? You've brought yourself up, and so you don't want to go all the way back to the beginning. We want to just take one step down the rung. So we're not sort of going all the way to the bottom, but we're continuing our elevation throughout the whole melody. Yud, He, Vav, He, Nigun. So, we'll try it out again. We'll start with the A section, and then we'll see if we can add the words. Torat Adonai temiman meshivat nafesh Edut Adonai nemana machimat beti Torat Adonai temiman meshivat nafesh Edut Adonai nemana machimat beti Hayabikudei Adonai yesharim mesamchei lev mitzvat Adonai bara meirat einayim Hayabikudei Adonai yesharim mesamchei lev mitzvat Adonai bara meirat einayim Yirat Adonai tehora omedet lad Mishpatei Adonai emet tzadku yachdav Yirat Adonai tehora omedet lad Mishpatei Adonai emet tzadku yachdav Hanechamadim mizahav umipazrav umetukim midevash venofet sufim Hanechamadim mizahav umipazrav umetukim midevash venofet sufim Yam diram nai nai Beautiful, everyone. Okay, would you like to be involved in the songwriting process for a moment? Okay, I am trying to decide how to sing the last line of the song. So the way that we just sang it is broken down by phrase. By word in a phrase. So it's Hanechamadi mizahav umipazrav umetukim midevash venofet sufim. I think that might be an easier way to sing it than sort of pushing the words together, which would sound like this. Hanechmadim mizav umipazrav umtukim midvash venofet sufim Hanechmadim mizav umipazrav umtukim midvash venofet sufim. No, not that way. Way one. Okay, cool. Is that only because that's the way that we sung it when we first learned it? Like we already have an affinity for it? Okay, we're feeling like that's actually an easier way.
Yeah, I think it's better.
All right. Well, you've now been involved. Everybody gets an asterisk songwriting credit.
Produced by everyone.
Hanechamadim mizahav umipazrav umetukim midevash venofet sufim. All right. One day this will also be a melody that's sung every Shabbos morning. It's I feel like it's one where like the 10 people who are at Shul that early can like march around the sanctuary, and maybe they'll even pull out the Torah because it's about Torah Adonai Temima, or they'll open up the Ark, they'll go over, they'll dance. That's how I imagine it. Sometimes when you're writing a song, you like imagine the different ways that it will be sung. This is one of those. All right, we're filling up for one last one for today. Okay. Here we go. Moving back into the creation story just for one more moment before we move beyond for the next 2 weeks. But this is another text that I really, really love from one of my favorite rabbis, Rav Simcha bar Pshischa. He's the rabbi who very famously said that there are 2 pieces of paper that we should always have in our pockets at all times. One that says, I am but dust and ashes, and one that says, the whole world was created for me, for balance. We're supposed to pull out the piece of paper that we need in any given moment. Or possibly we're supposed to pull out the piece of paper that we don't need in that particular moment. That's Rav Simcha bar Pshischa. So here's another teaching of Rav Simcha bar that I just find to be super powerful. Jackie, will you take us through this one too?
In the beginning, the Holy One created, and it follows that even now, far after the world was created, it is still as far as we are concerned in the beginning. Because this particular creation is not like a typical creation that is made by the hands of an artist, where after it is made, it no longer requires a maker. Rather, every single day and at every hour, the world is in need of renewing. And should energy in a higher power cease to be put into it, God forbid, the world would return to chaos and disarray.
Okay. All right, a whole lot going on here. Right, we're back to the very beginning. Breshit bara Elohim. This is the first words of the Torah. In the very beginning, God began to create. And so he says that so as far as the world being created, the world is a very different creation from a normal creation, right? Let's say you're a potter and you make ceramic pots for a living. Once you're finished making the ceramic pot, you sign your name on the bottom and then you sell it, right? You have no need for this pot anymore. It's done. Not so with God's creation of the world. Not so with the world. The world, Rav Simcha bar says that if ever this energy that's creating, if ever this creating, this renewing were to stop, the whole world would return to chaos and disarray. It's like if on a carousel that's sort of spinning by centrifugal force, and if it's spinning and spinning and spinning, and suddenly it stops and everything just flies off of it. That's sort of what I'm imagining. And I think the idea here is that it's not only God who's helping to renew and create the world. That as soon as humanity came into the world and began thinking about our deeds and acting in the world, it's up to us to begin to continue this renewal, to continue to create in the world, to become partners with God in this act of creation. And so it brings me to this text, which is HaMeir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha, God who lights up the world and all of its inhabitants with mercy. This text comes right after the Baruch Hu. It's in every single service. And for 26 years of my life, it just sat there, right there, and I would just read it and move past it. And it's one of those prayers that was always part of the murmurai for me. The murmurai being where you're like reading, you say Baruch Hu, and then everybody sits down and goes, et cetera, et cetera. But these words, if you look at them, they one day I looked at them and I said, "Oh my God, these are some nice words." God who lights up the world and all of its inhabitants with mercy. And here's the kicker: Uvtuvo mechadesh bechol yom tamid maaseh breshit. And in God's goodness, every day God renews the act of creation. So I thought, what does it mean to renew the act of creation every single day? Right? The idea is that somewhere in the world there is something new happening every single day, and that we ourselves, like we mentioned before, we're new. You have all of today's memories inside of you for tomorrow. So tomorrow, if you encounter some situation, you can't live it the same way that you lived today. You have to choose something else. And even if you choose the same, you're choosing it with more information than you chose yesterday. So we ourselves are new. And we get to become partners in this act of creating new things, of doing new things, of finding ways to keep the world spinning. And in thinking about what it means to create, to sort of rebirth the world every single day, Hebrew is a gendered language. So most of the time when we speak about God in the liturgy, we use masculine suffixes, masculine forms. which is how you would see this prayer if you saw it in the Siddur, Ha-me'ir la'aretz v'ledarim aleha. But in thinking about this rebirth, my co-writer for this song and I, Colleen Deeker, we thought, what would it feel like? What would it sound like? What would it taste like to speak about and think about God in the feminine? Right, to think about this rebirth as coming from the feminine aspect of God also. And so we decided to sing out Ha-me'ira, she who lights up the world and all of her inhabitants with mercy. And in her goodness, every single day, she renews the act of creation. So this melody begins with a hum. And this hum goes back all the way to the very beginning, the first primal hum. In the beginning, there was nothing, and then there was a hum, and then there was a bang, and suddenly the universe kept expanding and expanding and expanding until it encompassed all of us. And now, as we know, it's up to us to hum, to bring into existence more newness, more creation in the world. So we're going to start just with that hum, and we'll see if we can sing this one together. Hum, ha, hum, ha, 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 hum, ha, hum, ha, 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 hum, ha, hum, ha, 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 hum, ha, hum, Ha-me'ira, 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 Ha-me'ira la'aretz v'ladarim aleha v'rachamim. Just like that, Ha-me'ira, 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 Ha-me'ira la'aretz v'ladarim aleha, ladarim aleha, v'ladarim aleha, v'ladarim aleha, v'ladarim aleha, v'rachamim. Uktuva mechadeshet, uktuva mechadeshet, bechol yom tamid, uktuva. This time we sing it up high. Mechadeshet, ma'aseh, bereishit. Hum now, hum now, hum now, Thanks so much, everyone. I want to bless us that this week, as we continue our journey in Tshuva, our journey through Elul, that we find ways to continue to create new things in the world, that we continue to yefashfesh b'ma'aseinu, to explore and touch and go through our deeds, to choose the path that is most powerful, most true, most filled with peace and justice and righteousness next year.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.